Two, one, live. Well, if it ever loads. Jesus. There we go. Okay, so welcome to episode 9, tap 3 to counter. This will be Know Your Pods. My name's Chris.
I'm Anthony.
And I'm Josh.
Anyway, to answer what you were saying, the next rig we're going to be building is our tabletop rig down so that we can have a commander pod live. So that's what I want to do. That'll be the most immediate goal for the pod. But
Nice.
Let's just jump on into what we were talking about before, though. You were talking about knowing your pod and something that you learned early on. If you want to go ahead and lead off with that because you were on a roll.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, Chris, Josh, thanks for having me on the show. Long-time listener, shorter time fan.
9 episodes.
9 episodes in, I've only slept through 2 of them, so we're halfway there.
Thanks.
But no, Chris, you were asking about the aspect of when we talk about knowing your pod and what that looks like when playing with people. One of the things that you always joked about with me was that I could sit at any table and be like, yeah, I'm good. Whatever you guys want to play, however their play styles are, and I could mirror that pretty well, whether it was our friends that played very strong, very direct, very aggressive, or more of the people that were having fun at a table and were there just to, crack a couple jokes, play some crazy stuff, and just enjoy our time. And I think that's something that you kind of have always talked with me about, and you said, like, hey, Anthony, where does this come from? And I was telling you that when I first got started in Magic, 8 or 9 years ago, I had a really great friend of mine that sat across the table that taught me the format. And I was brand new, and essentially it was around when Guilds of Ravnica came out, and they had all the guilds that were represented by people because it was their play styles. And what he had brought me in from is saying, hey, Anthony, what I want you to be able to know is no matter who you're sitting across from the table from, it's about playing your game. It's about being yourself. And so when you're building decks around that, it's building who you are and understanding what that looks like. And when you go out and you're playing against other people, it's understanding that our natural tendency is to be less aggressive when you don't know who they are. So understanding that when you're building decks, maybe you're not building as aggressive up front. You're more building towards your play style. So for somebody that likes more of a control style of Magic, there are ways to build control that make you enjoy the game without going super extreme. It's like if you're playing with a music and you're changing the dials to tune everything in, he would always say you'll build to the 10 and then dial it back 1 or 2 notches. Because that way that when you're going out and playing with people, you're naturally going to do 1 or 2 degrees less than you would if you're with a pod of friends that you have. So you take away the ability for you to have to see that haymaker in your hand that you're like, man, if I do this, they're going to kill me. Instead, it's, you know what? I don't have that card in my hand right now for that deck. I joked about it with you, Josh, where you said, well, you don't have as many decks as most people. And I'm like, yeah, but I know where, for me, the decks that I have that are designed for when I go out and play with people just to play, where I go to a local card store, or when I'm getting together with you and Chris, I have a different group of decks because I've learned your play style. And that's the other part of it. When you talk about knowing your pod, it's who are you around the most? I'll give a great example. Chris, over the last year and a half of you really getting reinvested into Magic, what's your play style?
That's a couple of different ones. I would say that it has leaned into the more combo centric with an element of control because of the amount of removal that I run. Mm-hmm. So you're going to see anywhere between 12 and 15 removal spells for me in any deck that I run.
Right.
I don't have a deck with less than 12.
That's about accurate if you've ever played, Chris. And Josh, what about for you?
So I started out with a combo deck that I didn't know was a combo deck. I built a Cascade deck first off because I liked the idea,
mm-hmm.
and comboed in ways that I didn't expect. I mean, you were in one of the games and you helped me realize what was going on because I was just starting to get back into the game.
Yep.
And I went from that deck, and I mean, that one, when I moved on to my next deck, I still didn't understand what Cascade was really giving me. And I moved into Ishin, where I attempted a Samurai Tribal, and for about a month, maybe a month and a half, I was very determined to make that work.
It was so bad.
And it did not. Eventually I gave up on it. And then made it into an actual Ishin deck. Did a bunch of research to figure out, okay, what am I focusing on here with this deck? Attack triggers. And I was like, okay, let's just look up attack triggers and throw something together. And it wasn't until Chris mentioned this format of, you know, whatever it was, 14, 12, 10, for, you know, ramp, removal, draw, in whatever order. And I was like, that's an interesting idea. Like, you have to have some sort of response. Because and for me, just playing solitaire isn't enough. I can't just play my deck and hope that it goes. I gotta be able to respond to what they're doing, and when the threat comes out, I am hoping that I have some sort of response in my hand and be like, okay, that's a really big creature. I really don't want to deal with that. I really don't want it swinging at me. So I took that and I was like, okay, I looked at the 99. I split it my way. So I did 33 lands, 33 of the ramp removal and ramp removal draw. So splitting it, I run on average about 11, depending on how much I really want to uniquely create my deck. If I put more unique in it, there's going to be more than just 33 unique.
Yep.
So I run a little bit more on the unique heavy side because I like a deck to do what it wants, or like I like to make the deck all about that one focused idea. So Ishin, I'm putting a bunch of attack triggers in there, and if it does something extra, great. If it doesn't, oh well, it's an attack trigger.
Oh yeah, and what's cool is that when you talk about that breakdown of what you're looking at, there are so many bigger channels when you talk about like the Command Zone, Tolarian Community College, some of these massive EDH Recast, all these major channels when it comes to EDH and Commander that have talked about this generic spread that you see where a lot of decks lean more towards. Mm-hmm. And then the variation comes in when it comes to the pods that you start playing with. Mm-hmm. So like a great example, and you both can agree, I run less removal than both of you guys in a normal deck. I'm watching Chris, I'm watching your face, you're like, absolutely.
Yeah. Which is crazy because you still beat our ass half the time, so it's like...
And I'll tell you why. And here's the point that I made a little bit earlier. My play style is less about interacting and more of a politic game.
Yeah, no
I'm
shit.
very... Yeah.
Dude,
I know where
who in the tournament. You realize that I would have won that game had you not affected it, and I would have gotten 3 first places, not went to the dice roll, and went to the finals. You shitter.
Hey, here's what's interesting. Everybody has a different style. I know for me, I am naturally a nice person. I am not the guy that's going to sit there and remove a bunch of stuff. That's never been my MO. So when I build my decks, I build more responsive. So you'll see more recursion in my deck than you will see removal in my deck. The removal that I play in the deck is designed more for across the board or very direct, where it's something where if you see a major threat, you can go after it, or it affects everybody, and knowing what that looks like. When I first got started with Commander, I was a token guy. I wanted to just build a whole bunch of stuff. Everything was super cool. If you wipe my board, I'll build it again and again and again. And that was just my play style. as I got more mature and got into it, I learned how to build almost a hybrid of what that looked like. And I will run, instead of more removal, I will run more recursion and card draw, because I know that I may have in my play group guys that are going to remove way more cards. Well, how do you respond faster? I was telling you both, I play a lot online. I leverage a lot of tools because of where I'm located. I don't get to see you guys as often. So I get to play a lot of Commander virtually, using my own cards, using my own decks. So the decks that I have to be able to be designed to play with a lot of different styles, versus in our budget league, I have very hyper-tuned budget decks. They're probably the best decks that I build across the board.
Yeah.
Because I know the play group that I'm playing with, I know the styles that are being played, and I understand the format and the people around the table for me. And the only way that comes is by playing with them. Josh, has your play style changed and adjusted as you've gotten to play more with Chris?
Yeah. I mean, we pretty much play like almost every day, at least one game near the end of work or whatever. I mean, me and him have been back and forth really just testing decks. Like, and when we get to test it that way, we get to see the weaknesses right up close. Like, I'm working on a Shrine Enchantment deck. I noticed right off the bat, man, that thing is slow.
Scarab God.
Yeah. I'm like...
So, I mean, has my playstyle evolved? Yeah. Everybody, I think everybody with their experience, you evolve, regardless of who you're playing with. I think you eventually break away from basic style decks and might find something in a pre-con that you like really connect with, and you might run with that for a little while. And then you're like, oh, you know what? I haven't done this deck or this deck, and you might want to try something new. I jumped into a combo deck. I really liked the idea of infinite combats. I was introduced to the idea through Ishin and having double triggers off of Ryu, who attacking alone got an additional combat, and then on a Ishin trigger, I got an additional one. I was like, that's a really cool idea. What if I just infinite combats? And I was like, okay, who would be a good infinite combat? And sure enough, there's a commander, Najila. She has her own built-in infinite combat. And I was like, that's cool. And it's WooBird. Okay, let's try it. And then I came up and I threw some warriors in there, but I threw a lot of infinite combat combos by themselves. So like Godo the Bandit Warlord. Is it Godo? Okay, so Godo and the Bandit Warlord, and Helmel the Host.
Yep. Famous infinite combat combo.
Absolutely famous. Learned about that one, researched it. Why does it work? Tried to figure that out, and I was like, okay, got my head wrapped around that. After going through and building the entire deck, I eventually came up with a combo that I've never seen anybody else do.
Homebrew.
And I was like, I can't believe I just found this and then came up with it. I was like, what's his name? The one that does extra combats off of Morog, off of Landfall. Morog. I was like, okay, Morog. I did some research and I looked up, hey, how can I flicker a land? And I was like, okay, return, there was the
Ruin Ghost.
Flicker Kitten.
Yeah, I know.
Who can flicker things when you play stuff? But I was like, okay, let me take it one step further. And I found this card, Ruin Ghost, where you pay 1 white and you tap him, and you can flicker a land, but you flicker the one that you just paid. So it comes in untapped, and then you have additional combat with Morog, which after that combat phase, you untap all your creatures. So with 2 cards and Morog, you could infinite combo. And I've never seen anybody post anything like that.
So, Josh, I'll tell you something that's really cool. When you take that type of skill set, that's really awesome because you can shows where you're kind of going with that mentally. There's a website that I found recently when I think of the two of you whenever I play that legitimately I go, I need a double check, and it's I just pulled it up. It's called commanderspellbook.com.
Your spellbook. I gotta look this up. All right.
It is a website just like an EDH rec, a Moxfield, a Scryfall, but it's specifically designed for combos.
By the way,
Okay.
Jose Bonilla says hi, Anthony.
Oh, tell Jose I said hello.
And Richard also said hi from the card store.
Oh, tell Richard I said hi too.
Welcome, guys.
Welcome.
Um,
So getting back to this website, what's awesome is you can actually take your deck list from Scryfall or Moxfield, input it into the website, and it'll show you every combo that exists, or if you're off by a card, cards that you can add to create infinite insert combo here. And then you can actually click on it and it'll explain how the interaction happens.
that's
funny.
We need to cut this part out of here because we're gonna have a bunch of crackheads with.
Don't need to feed people this.
Yeah, oh Lord.
But here's
that's
the funny thing, and I will tell you why I found this. When you talk about knowing your pod, one of the biggest things that I do consistently is when I'm building a deck, I know that there's going to be things that I need to be aware of, or things that I don't want to have happen in my deck. I'll give you a great example. One of the very first commander decks that Chris ever saw me run was my Jorn deck. As I call him, Frosty the Jorn Man. And what's crazy about that deck is that most people, when they build that deck, it's about infinite mana, stasis or preventing people from untapping, and all these different things that go with it. Chris, does my deck have any of that?
No, yours wouldn't fall into any of the like templates on EDH Rec for like obviously the basic stuff, like you have to have snow lands and stuff like that, but no, it's very homebrew.
And what's funny is that I ran the deck through Spellbook because I was looking for something specifically. And there are goals that I have with that deck. I love creating a lot of mana to be able to pump into X spells. I love being able to do it for a couple of the win cons in the deck are all based on producing a lot of mana to be able to win through that. Now, it's not about interacting with people or stopping everybody. It's just how I win. And what was cool is that through this, I actually found that there was 1 or 2 cards that I could adjust in the deck that made that ability happen more often or easier without even having to change the way that I played my deck. It was just changing a card, with still keeping my style of Magic at the forefront. But knowing the group of people that I played with, I had to adjust to my pod.
Yeah, it keeps you in that. So the level of attention to detail that you're at your juncture, and then the level of attention to detail that we're at our junctures, because obviously there's tier levels of experience, and you and Hector and probably Kevin and a few others are like right here, and then me and Josh are up and coming, and so on and so forth. That first wall you have to break through, which I wanted to say earlier, but it took a while. The wall between combat decks and combos, not just infinite ones, but when you start to understand how cards interact with other cards, not only your own but other people's. So like obviously we remove a lot of stuff. That's written on the card. But being able to see a card like Ruined Ghost or any of the other combo pieces that we talked about and say, oh man, that would go really well with this to achieve this goal. That's that first wall that you need to break through when you're learning how to build a deck, because every deck is a combat deck at the beginning, pretty much.
Yep.
I've never seen anybody who didn't build combat first.
True.
So, because it's straightforward.
So, go ahead.
No, that was my point. I'm just saying that first wall is the one that, especially for people who are new to the game, they really should focus on getting that card knowledge and figuring out how those combos will go together in order to achieve a goal.
So, Chris, let me ask you this. When you got to that point for you, because like you said, you're overcoming that. You said, I'm a little bit further along in my Magic journey. Was there a moment for you that you knew, hey, this is an area for me that, what was that for you that you started saying? Was it a deck? Was it a particular commander?
It was.
What was that for you?
Joda. When I finished Joda, I was like,
Yeah?
damn, I have 5 combat decks and 1 combo deck that doesn't work.
And how many decks did you build until you got to that point? Realistically.
Including the ones I disassembled?
Yeah.
Probably 30. Probably 30. 30 bad ones, but 30.
So, you know what's funny is that for me, I was in a very similar path, so it's a lot less decks. For me, it was more amount of games.
What was pride? I tried to do it without looking stuff up and without doing any research because I'll figure it out on my own, which is stupid.
There's this fun balance between net decking and building for you. And I think that's where a lot of people, there are so many tools and resources that you can go to an EDH rec and look at a deck list or Scryfall or Moxfield and just pull a deck list that you know is going to work and that exists and be like, I have a new deck and this is awesome. And yeah, that's part of it. But Chris, to your point, it's the idea of getting to learn what that looks like. For me, that was my Jorn deck. Where
stellar deck.
Yeah, where I picked something that was very off the wall, very different, and I loved the aspect of the card type. And I think that's what I've noticed a lot for people when I've sat across the table, when I've had conversations. It's either a card, a style of card, or something that they've seen that they go, you know what, I want that kind of deck, but it's not who I am. And now they're forced to deviate, like you talked about with my Jorn deck, where it was deviating from how everybody else built it. Meaning I kind of had to start on my own. And it got me invested into something, just like when we have passions outside of Magic, where you start going down that rabbit hole of YouTube and things like that, and you start falling in love with something, you start working on building and developing it out because it becomes like your pride. This is something that I build and I'm excited about. And then, go ahead.
No, I was just going to comment that I kind of understand what you're saying with the building portion, but the commander choices for me aren't placed. I don't think I have, I do play a way that you can identify, but I don't have a type that like rumbles my cage.
Well, when I say type, I fell in love with snow creatures, snow mana, the type of a card, the snow mechanic.
No, I know what you mean. I'm saying I don't have a thing that I'm like,
maybe.
I pick my commanders until I just bought Scarab God, and that's the first commander I've bought months. Richard said he's got a type, it rumbles, big ass creatures. I have my book because I open high volume sealed product. Everybody
you open more product than I can even. You've opened more product in the last year than I have probably in my entire Magic lifetime.
That is probably a fair assessment because I'm looking at 19 empty boxes down there.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just differences in how we play and what our passions are with it.
Well, I net value, and then most of the time. But what I do is I have my binder of trades, and I have them organized by color and by multicolor. And I'll just flip. And I'll flip through my book, and I'll be like, that's cool. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And then I'll flip through it again. And if something tickles my eye twice, then I pull it out. And I'm like, what do I have that I can build with this? And that's how I pick my commanders. I don't... Scarab God is the first one that I have picked in months that wasn't in my book.
And Chris, how many decks have you built before that?
Before Scarab God?
Before you made that choice. So what was how many decks between the Scarab God pick and the last commander that you picked because of it being a commander? Was this your first one?
No, ironically, Joda was the first one the first book pick. So the
Really?
first book pick was also the last combat pick. Their last
So
combat on purpose.
So realistically, knowing you, that's probably been about 10 to 20 decks
Yeah.
in difference because of that. Josh, are you on my, a little bit closer to where I'm at with things, or you a little bit more on where Chris is at? What is that for you?
I mean, I love building decks just as much as he does, but I think I don't really pick commanders based off of like what tickles my fancy or what I see in my trade binder. I actually shoot more for what is the theme of the deck. What kind of deck do I really want to build next? After Najeela, which is all combat, it's still a combat deck, but it's a combo combat deck, an infinite combat deck. I was like, okay, what can I do? What could I do next? I was like, I haven't tried a full combo deck. I was like, okay, who's good at combos? And through a bunch of research, because I like doing research just as much as I like building the decks.
Mm-hmm.
Come to find out, I ran across Elsha. I was like, Elsha of the Infinite. Okay. I actually have one of those. Okay. I actually have two of them. Well then. I then did more research and I was like, okay, let me watch some gameplay. See what happens in an Elsha deck. I don't even know where to start. And first deck I saw, the guy played let's see, Helm Awakening. And got countered. I was like, what does that do? Okay, let me look it up. Oh, reduces spell cost. Okay, all right. What was he gonna do with that? Watch the gameplay some more, and watched him pull out, Divining Top, and then he went infinite with it, and I was like,
"Is this the stuff I want?"
Thank you.
Surprise visitor.
Guest star. Josh what? Well, he's talking about the Foundry Inspector Infinite.
Yeah.
Whenever you infinitely draw your deck, which makes Elsha infinitely massive, and then you swing for commander damage, which sucks to get hit with.
Sounds
my wife,
right.
everybody. My wife.
Yeah. Tell her we all said hi. But you know what's really cool when you talk about that, Josh? Is it kind of ties to the theme of Chris, what we were talking about today, which was knowing your pod. Because when you have decks that you start, or styles or things that you're trying to accomplish, when you're building your deck, there are decisions that you're making that you don't realize are impacted by the pods that you play with. That's why, personally, for me, I love the pre-con decks that are coming out nowadays, because for most people, they can pull them off a rack and play with anybody at a table.
Yes.
Are they going to fit perfectly within a pod of people? Definitely not. But they're going to give somebody that ability to play a game of Commander and find a little bit more about whether they love a style or a theme of a deck like I do. They fall in love with a particular card, maybe like Chris. Or for you, Josh, where it's the aspect of, hey, I like this type of style of play that I want to find because I get excited by it, and now I want to find a commander that fits that.
Yep.
I mean, we really are all different parts of the spectrum if you look at it.
Yeah.
Because I never have direction. I'm literally randomly looking at commanders until I'm like, that's neat.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? When you talk about like first time, the deck that I've built right now for our Commander League is the first time that I've ever built a deck that is everything but the commander. And it was a challenge for me because if people don't know in your chat or on this recording, we're part of a Commander budget league that we've built and designed, and we've scaled it from literally 4 people to almost 20. Just crazy to think about. We're up to 26 now in a year time frame, and we build a deck, 100 cards, $10 for the commander, the rest is $100. Roll with it. And every quarter, essentially, we've gotten together to play, and we've always had something different. Whether it was bring your own deck from home because it's the Halloween season, and so let's go spooky themed. Or it's White Elephant Gift Exchange and you get a commander. Or the most recent one, which is color pods, and you get a randomly generated color selection that you have to build the deck off of. And for mine, I got 4 color. I got blue, black, green, and red. And everything that I saw with this was Cascade. It was Yidris, Cascade, Yidris, yep. Cascade.
Yep.
And I will be honest with you, I am not the combo guy. Never have been. I built 1 combo deck. I still have it, actually 1.5, I will be honest with you. But one that I play consistently, that is a landfall deck, and I hate it. I am not the guy that likes taking 15 minutes a turn. Never been that way. And so,
that's the wrong.
Yeah, I'm watching. Chris is like
the opposite spectrum.
Well, I got the idea for my landfall deck from your landfall deck.
Yeah,
because I built Karametra right after that.
Oh, I'm aware. I helped you build it.
Yeah, Karametra right after your. What is yours? Yours Omnath or Pylath?
So I have Omnath, Locus of the Royal.
I do now.
It's a Temur landfall deck that is based around elementals.
Temur.
And the deck itself is not fully optimized, but I have stalled games out. I have run people over. I've gotten people. So and again, I've been able to hit that extreme. But what was funny is that when I built the deck that I'm working on right now, and I'm currently fine-tuning it, I said, you know what I've never done is I've never taken everything but a commander and built a deck, a theme, an experience, what I'm trying to accomplish that fits the pod that I'm in. And that's what I did. And then when selecting the commanders, although very few were available, thank you guys.
You did. I didn't roll crap.
What was funny is that there was actually a commander set that fit the theme close enough that got me to where I needed to be. And that for me was something that I wasn't expecting. And I love the deck because I am the theme guy. Well, you can ask anybody that's ever played a game with me. Every deck that I have has a theme.
Well, even you, as you're in 9 years in the game now, you're still growing too. Building that deck. The reason why we do the budget league is because it's an exercise. It helps put you out of your comfort zone, so you don't build the same 6 decks every time, just with different commanders and different colors.
Right.
It saves you from yourself, sort of.
Like this budget season, I got Dimir. Never been interested in the color combo. I saw, Chris do zombies multiple times, and never, there it is, coming back for another swing with Scarab God. But I mean, it never, the colors never spoke to me. I never went out of my way to go build a Dimir deck. So it really put me way out of my comfort zone. And I was like, you know what? Let me figure out what I want to build. What do I want to play? I'm not going to give anything away because I don't want anybody to know what the heck I'm playing. But
trust me, I'm the same way.
Really threw me out.
I already know what you're playing, you turd.
I know you know what I'm playing, but
different.
So, and I think that's what I love about not only our group, but our budget league is we're pushing people out of their comfort zones to build something new. Even if, let's just say, they got a color that they're very familiar with, build something new. Build something else. Don't do the same thing that you've already built something for.
You mean my Is It?
Right. 3 people got mono red. Okay. You probably built a mono red before. Build something else. Build something different. There's new people, or there's new commanders, new legendary creatures being brought out in every set. You might find something you really like.
And what I love about what we have, and this is something that's really cool, is that because of the group of people and the play style that we've kind of created, is that when you have these opportunities to create something new, to design something new, you're now having to do a little bit of research. But for me, when I built this deck, is I knew that I needed X amount of removal because of the format that I play with. I knew that I needed X amount of card draw because of what things look like. And all of a sudden, back to Josh, what we talked about earlier, you had your piles that you had to fill. So really building a deck starts shrinking to something that's a little bit more manageable. And I think that's what's really cool is that if you're playing with anybody in the world, and you watch we talked about some of these channels earlier, and you see the how to build a generic commander deck.
Mm-hmm.
You can follow that format, build any deck that you want, and you can sit down at a table with somebody and it be a competitive game of Magic if you know how to, if you're not greedy.
Well, yeah.
There are people. Go ahead.
The formula helps you dump out a 7. You can
Correct.
dump a weak 7 out mathematically.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris, I love the topic that you talked about before this, is that as much as it's about knowing your pod, it's the rule zero conversation.
Yep.
And it's going through and being honest with people about where it's at. Now, mind you, in rule zero conversations, we're all those types of people. Nobody will ever say, my deck is not that good.
I do
Ever.
all the time.
Well, yeah, you also
everybody says
undersell. You also undersell.
No, I have decks that I keep crappy for playing with people who are crappy.
But again, it's that aspect too of that rule zero. How much are you honest with people about what that looks like? What is that conversation that comes into play of like, hey, I'm looking for, I don't usually ask how powerful is your deck? Because most people are going to say it's a 7. And a 7 for one person can be a 9 or a 10, or it could be a 5 or a 6. Sometimes even a 3. What I like to ask, outside of kind of understanding a little bit about who the commander is or their goal, is what turn are you trying to win by? Are you trying to win by turn 3 or 4? Where you're probably going to see combo decks, you're probably going to see a lot more of the Mana Crypts, Lotus Petal. Right. You're going to start seeing some of these CEDH high-level decks that are designed for that.
Yep.
Or are you looking for more of a fun, competitive game? Okay, well, I have a deck that's going to be different for each of those. And it gives me an idea of, am I playing against these guys and they're going hard and fast? And it's no holds bar? Or are we looking for a fun game of Commander? Because the worst thing you want to do when you sit across the table from somebody is you have one person, we all know who this person is, that is super hard charger and will do everything in their possible to be super efficient. And then there are the people that will make less efficient plays when they play with people that they don't know because they're trying to have fun.
Right, because the whole point is to play the game.
Right.
That same person that we all know doesn't like it when you do the same thing back, though. So,
correct.
Like the other day, I was playing my Kaalia deck, and I was playing next to a better player playing a Kaalia deck. We both put Kaalia on the board on the same turn, and the other player did another thing, and mine gets popped, and then it gets popped again. So I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna make sure you lose, and that's what I did.
and that right there is part of the experience of when you play with some people that you're friends with.
Yep.
And when you're inviting that new person to the table, maybe it's somebody that's never played this game before. Maybe it's, you bring your significant other in to sit for the very first time to play a game of Magic. and you've been joking, you've been laughing, like you guys know each other forever. Like Chris, when we play Magic together, or the three of us, when we're playing together at a table, it's a very different conversation.
I'm super
It's a
annoyed with
very-
you still from the tournament. I'll never forgive you.
It's a very yeah. I've screwed a lot. I've messed a lot of people up because I played really
Dude,
well
the
and had to leave
politics.
early.
Right. No, it's
did
the
nothing
politics,
you
man.
did nothing that entire game, and I had mercy on you because I was like, I'm not going to swing on him because it's Anthony, and I want him to get in the game. And then you were like, kill him.
Yep, he's the threat.
Yeah.
No,
I was.
I
the
was
threat.
wrong.
I was.
I
The threat.
wasn't
No,
wrong.
he was right. I was the threat.
I mean, the way I play, I go for the same thing. Like if I have response, I'm gonna try and handle the threat that's on the field.
Yep.
If you're holding something and I don't know about it, and it's a bigger threat than what's currently on the field, threatening my, life points, well, good on you for holding that because it's probably gonna run. Because I'm gonna pop that fucking thing first.
And it's the craziest thing that people don't realize is that you will get further along with playing with others if you mulligan properly. You've built a deck that makes sense. It doesn't have to be competitive.
No,
Chris, do you know why I win more games than most people and I don't build the same way that you guys do?
Well, I would argue that it's one. Okay, there's more than one reason, but I'm not sure which one you're fishing for. But two things I would say. One is your politics is unbeatable because you're so nice. Everybody just trusts you inherently. It's really annoying.
So I will tell you a funny. Remind me, I have a funny story at the end of this to explain with that piece. But what was the second?
The second is, I don't know anybody who can do more with less. Your decks are the most budget decks that I see on the table every single time, but the synergies between the cards that you do select for your decks go together so perfectly usually that it doesn't matter that they're cheap cards.
So that was actually the second one was actually where I was going with it. For me, one of the reasons that I play the way that I do the things that I do and have the success that I do is because I know the deck that I built. I know what it can do. I know what it can't do. So my mulliganing, I know how to mulligan. I know what I need in a deck. Great example, my Jorn deck. I'll keep going back to it. If I don't have a green mana in my opening hand, I'm not keeping it. Yeah. I could have 5 lands. I could have the best hand in the world, but I will never keep it if I don't have a green source because I know what my deck needs to do, and sometimes I will be less greedy to have a hand that's competitive. It's one thing that I hear all the time. If you've ever heard any other podcast on Magic, the first thing they tell you after learning how to build a deck in Rule 0, learn how to mulligan. And don't be afraid to say, you know what? This is a good hand. If a couple of things come together, it's a little bit slower.
Yep.
You're more likely to stay in a game than take a risk. And you either get out to a super fast start and then have nothing left, and then you get blown out of the game because you were the fast guy on the table. Then the guy that slows down a little bit and plays, and then all of a sudden, mid-game, all of a sudden becomes a threat now.
That might be the best piece of advice from this entire podcast today. Mulligan better.
Mulligan better.
Go ahead.
No, I mean that totally makes 100% sense to not only know who you're playing, but know your deck. You know your pod, but know your deck. It's a big thing. I mean, and honestly, you get that really through not only just building it, but really playing it. You don't really know what your deck can and cannot do. You can look at a million combos and be like, okay, if I have this and this in hand, I could win. Chances are you're not going to have a Thassa's and a Demonic Consultation every turn one. When you're looking at when you speak to yourself. When you're looking at CEDH, that combo, you cannot guarantee you're going to have one of those pieces to get that turn 1, turn 2.
And you know what's crazy when you say that, Josh? There's a YouTube channel called Play to Win, which is specifically competitive EDH, and I've watched them play through a couple of games. You will see more people mill to 4 and 5 than in any other game of Magic, because when you have a deck that's designed for that, you're playing to win and need specific cards in hand versus playing a game of Magic.
Right.
And that's where that you hit it right on the head, Josh. The Mulligan understanding of what your play group is like is what's going to determine what's a good hand that's keepable and what's a bad hand that isn't. No matter how fast or slow or accurate that it is, it can have everything that you want in it. But because you don't have any removal in your hand and you're about to play your 2 biggest things, and I'm sitting across the table from Chris, and I know he's going to interact with absolutely everything that I do, if I know that I have something major that I need to do and I have in hand, and I don't have a response or a way to combat it or recover from it,
protect it, or recur it. Yep.
mm-hmm, I need to know, hey, you know what? I either need to put it aside or I need to say, all right, I'm about to be the threat on this table and I need to play like a threat.
Yeah.
Honestly,
And
God,
that's the biggest thing.
Those CEDH decks you're talking about too, they also run another really key component for finding the cards that you need. Their draw
Tutors.
is replaced by tutors. They're not
Yep.
drawing; they're tutoring way more than they're drawing, which is why a lot of them have black because
Right, and-
tutor's the best.
Right. And and that at that point, going back into the mulligan, they're mulliganing until they get 1 to 2 pieces or even just tutors.
Yep. And that's what makes it so interesting when you're building decks, when you're playing in these environments, because that ultimately determines how you play to a pod, how you know the pod that you're playing with. The whole topic of what we're talking about, all the fun stories, you learn what that looks like. And then the way that you play the game, whether it is very interactive or for some people very politicky, it's it's learning what that looks like, because there's always going to be one thing that's going to be consistent anytime you play Magic, and that you're always going to have somebody across the table from you.
Not if I murder.
So so it's learning that aspect of knowing, Josh, you talked about it, who you are at the start of a game and what your normal tendencies look like. You're going to have way more fun if a deck you're playing is who you are as a person and maybe a little bit less of a powered deck than playing something more powerful but having no idea what it looks like when you're playing in a pod just because they're more competitive. Look, Chris, have I ever played a deck against you guys that is not as powerful but somehow still win?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Or have you seen other yourselves play a deck that maybe is a little bit less tailored for the table that you're at, that all of a sudden comes out and wins something? I can think of your wizard deck. I can think of your wizard deck 100%, Chris, that you built. It was Grixis Wizards.
Well, you can think of the old version because it's CEDH now.
The original version of the deck
Right.
Yeah.
that you ran. You literally were telling me about this. You were like, I don't know. These guys play very competitively, very high power tuned decks,
And then I won.
and you ended up like pretty much winning the event.
I did. I won the event. I crackled on the last turn and killed everybody.
And it was because you knew yourself and you trusted the deck enough that you didn't have to play something that wasn't you. In a pod, understanding, hey, I'm probably going to have to be more interactive, or I'm probably going to have to be a little bit more aggressive or less aggressive because of who I'm playing with.
Well, referring
You
back
can
to-
play.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Play what?
I was going to say you can play the same deck as many different ways as you can by how you choose to play the deck. And a deck can be either super competitive or super generic, casual, all by the decisions that you make of playing cards.
Two things. One, Richard said,
Yeah,
appreciate
I'm reading the comments.
He said, appreciate Yugi giving us the heart of the cards, believe in your deck speech. And
No,
then-
Yeah, go ahead.
He's like, I'm more of a Kaiba, big dragons, hell yeah. But in response to what you were saying, I think that the biggest thing in our pod specifically, you may be right. I learned the removal thing from the person we're talking, from Hector, who's
Yep.
obviously been on here before. And then it grew out because people were asking me for stuff, and I was teaching the same thing to them. And now we have 20 people that run 10 to 14 removal.
Oh my god.
Yeah, which is ridiculous because in a 4-pod you have anywhere between 40 and 44 removal minimum.
In a game.
Yeah, minimum.
Yeah.
Which I build my decks the way that I build my decks to our pod.
Yep.
The unique in my decks suffer sometimes. Not in the most recent ones. I actually have some new stuff to show you.
Don't get me started on the removal, Richard says.
Don't you whine over there. The most recent ones I fixed that. I've started really focusing on what the unique portion of my deck does. For I'd say the last 5 or 6. But there for a while I was stuck in a rut where this formula felt like law. And I was building decks that did things, but their predominant focus was interaction, which will net you a shitload of second places.
Especially if you have somebody that knows how to politic.
Correct. Because then they'll make everybody against you so you die, and then you get a lot of 4th places.
Oh,
I
can't politic my way out of a sandbag.
Yeah, Richard just said I legit told Chris the other day at Cool Stuff I had to take a break from our pods because too much removal. We love you too, buddy. But I've really focused back up. So like with this deck I'm rebuilding right now because I'm transitioning the $20 Jisun Gerald to a Scarab God.
Yep.
And the focus of the deck is it's actually my first intentionally combat deck for a while because I'm restoring zombies. You remember the zombies I built when I first started playing? It was very clunky. It did have a theme. It did have a theme, but it was super clunky.
Yes, it was.
So what I want to do is I want to make a model of that deck correctly. So the theme is tokens.
And I think honestly, I know we've been talking a little while, and I know we're going to chat a little bit more. That right there is a topic that I would put a pin in as something that's really cool to come back to and talk about for a whole episode.
Yeah,
where it's the aspect of taking a deck that you shelved for a while and then repurposing it. You talked about, Josh, your Isha deck.
Yep.
And you said this was a deck that I really wanted to work and it just didn't. It didn't work at all. And then you changed the style of it, and now probably one of your favorite decks.
Yep.
I remember watching your last episode, and that was one of the very first decks you talked about.
Yep.
Was Isha.
Well, last weekend he won 6 games. 6 out of 8, which was crazy.
6 out of 8.
I won 1, he won 6, and then somebody else won 1.
And that's what's so cool. So cool. So yeah, I'd put a pin in that and maybe talk about that in next week or something like that.
We can convince Anthony to be a guest next week too.
Throw it in the comments, guys.
But as far as the rebuilds, it's just man, there's a lot of clunkiness to get rid of in this specific tribe.
Richard's saying you buy everything already. Scarab God was his first. He still has a bunch of zombie cards. So if you're, you've already bought like 2 zombie precons. He probably already has a lot. But
my edits.
Hey, maybe he has some uniques that you're still missing. So, but
actually, on that point of buying, and I'm glad you brought that up, Josh. I run decks. I can think of 2 specifically that I have cards that I will play when I play with people in general, and will swap out when I play with you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, side decks.
And I have built decks. I can think of 3 that I have that I did that with.
Is it Oozes? Is Oozes one of them?
Oozes is one of them.
Oozes. Oh, Oozes.
hey, that deck crushed a lot of people, and people got so confused.
Yep.
I'll send you the deck list, Richard, when I finish it, if you want to take a peek.
But that right there is something, too, that I think that when you're playing with people, is being okay with saying, hey, I'm willing, I know cards that I can swap in and out. My Shurikai deck's another one.
Yep.
I run a Shurikai vehicle deck. And I don't run Isochron Scepter or any of that crazy stuff. Again, not combo guy. But I have cards or vehicles that are in that deck that I will swap out between games depending on the play group that I'm with. There's a standard style to that deck, and then a couple things that I may change in or out because I'm trying to lower the power of the deck or raise the power of the deck. And I'm okay with knowing, because I keep all my decks on Scryfall, I know the adjustments that I need to make that available, to make that easier.
It's like a sideboard.
To give myself that option. Like a sideboard.
Yeah.
But for Commander.
Yeah, even though we don't have one.
Yeah. Yeah, honestly I do the same thing. You know, the deck boxes normally come with a little divider. I'm usually storing, you know, anywhere between like 5 to 20 cards back there that I'm like, this would be a really good idea. So I just throw it back in there. Not messing with the deck, you know? And then I'm like, okay. Oh, I just found out. Don't put what's the one card that just wiped my board this last weekend?
Cleansing Nova. Oh, this weekend?
Yeah.
I don't know a lot of games, dude.
She gives -the board wipe.
Massacre Girl. Yeah.
Yes. There we go. Massacre Girl. I top decked that on a flip from Ishin.
Oof.
He wiped his own board. It was great.
I wiped my own board. Hey, I still pulled it out.
He still won the game, though. That was
So
great.
what?
So-
but it was super funny.
And I'll show you, like,
And I was like, well, I had that stack that's behind that divider, and I was like, that needs to come out immediately. And I was like, okay, here, boom, done.
I have so Chris, you've always seen me walk around with this small little black box.
It's so black.
Every single Commander deck that I will bring on a weekly basis, I'll bring anywhere between 4, 6. I run 9 total decks. Every deck that I have has a small sideboard that I've learned, that I've grown to love, that I may make adjustments with, or I just really love super cool tokens, and I want to keep those tokens. And I'll keep them in a small box with me. It's simple, it's easy to throw in a bag, and it gives me the ability to adjust the decks on a fly. And it's those simple things that give you that ability to play with anybody. Because I think that's the hardest challenge, is that when you go to a local store, if you don't have a traditional pod that we have, you're going to play with a bunch of random people. You're going to play games with people that you may only bring 3 decks because those are your 3 decks that you wanted to play. And you're sitting down with people that are playing super high level Magic. And you're like, well, shoot, I don't know how I'm going to be able to compete. And now I can make 1 or 2 swaps. Or if I'm playing more with casual guys and I have really high powered decks, I can make 1 or 2 swaps and drop the tier level of the deck and play a little bit differently to make it competitive.
Yeah, well, when you're, it's the difference, but it's back to knowing who you're playing with. It's the difference between someone who just bought a pre-con and playing an RPOD.
Yep.
Like, I feel bad for the kid who, Andrew, who's actually now, you know, very communicative in our group chat and, you know, super good, you know, become part of the group. He started, the deck that he played in our tournament was his first deck of pre-con. So he got trial by fire going into a pod that, because he was playing a pre-con, I basically one-shot him because he didn't have any interaction, whereas I interacted with everything that he did. Apparently I have a reputation for interacting with everything.
Yes, you do.
Oh no, I'm so upset about that.
Learned behavior.
Alpha dog. No, I'm just kidding. And he did great. He won a couple games. I think he won a game or 2 and had a good time, learned a lot, and all of us we pulled our punches a little bit because we wanted him to get to, you know, that experience, you know. But I imagine next time going into our next tournament, he's going to be that much better, having already been through all that, seen how a pre-con holds up as opposed to a hand-built deck, and then now he's had the opportunity to build one himself. So I imagine to see a much better player coming into the next tournament as opposed to the last one.
And I know that we've been chatting for almost an hour now, which is crazy. And I know you guys like to keep your videos kind of short. So kind of wrapping up on the recording side of things, because we can always keep this conversation going offline, which I know we will. One of the biggest things that I will say to anybody when they're playing with a pod, have fun. Don't be the guy. Don't be that guy when you're playing with people that are new or veterans or whatever that is.
Yep.
Know that it's okay to get frustrated. It's okay to be pissed off. It's okay to want to throw somebody through a wall because of way too much interaction. But at the end of the day,
Yep.
know that it's a game, and our biggest goal is to be able to have people want to come back and play again. It's how we've grown our pod from the four of us essentially sitting around a table at a card shop to, Chris, you said over 26 people that are playing now.
Last count, yeah.
That doesn't happen because everybody's trying to win everything. There's still that level of competitiveness, but it's a term that I learned from my dad when it came to golf when I played with him. He said, you can play with anybody. You can play with a pro, you can play with an amateur, you can play with a millionaire, you can play with a ditch digger. He said, the most important thing that you do is you have fun, you keep it light, and at the end of the game, sometimes you just got to scoop. It may not be your day, it may not be your pod, you may be completely outmatched. It's okay to scoop. It's okay to say, hey, can I play with you guys? And maybe one of the guys has got a deck that fits that tier better, and you're willing to say, you know what? I really want to play with these guys. Maybe they're better Magic players. Maybe they're people that you've always wanted to play with, and you may not match up well. And be willing to say, hey, you know what? I'll play one of their decks. Instead of being the ego guy and going, you know what? I'll make my deck work.
Honestly, we play test games and scoop every week.
Yeah.
If I know I've lost, I just scoop because I'm not going to waste your time.
Well, yesterday, I scooped my enchantment deck. I knew I was going to lose.
Sorry.
I mean, but I learned. See, that's the thing. I love testing a deck. I love figuring out where is its weakness. Where did I go wrong? What could I do to make a change to cover that weakness? Or if it's set in stone, that is what it is. It's going to play that way. Then that's a deck that I will set aside for a different group or a different pod. That if you're not playing a super aggro enchantment deck where you're gonna swing at me with 20 something commander damage.
Read Richard.
Three turns in.
Let's see what's this comment? I'm not seeing the comment.
He said scooping can be fun. Sometimes it's so fun I scoop my way to the cool stuff buy list and make my deck question its decision. Oh no, Richard.
You know what the truth is though? Here's the one thing that I've learned.
They brought a tear to
At the end of the day, the end of the day, playing with anybody is part of what makes this game amazing. Coming up in a couple of weeks, there's Command Fest Orlando.
I'm going.
And that event right there, you are going to play with people with so many different varieties of skill level. You could play with pros. You could play with content creators. You could play with anybody. The decks that you bring to an event like that are designed to play with anybody. Are designed for having fun. And you may have a deck that's really designed for going fast and a deck that may be a little bit slower.
Yep.
Bring both.
And bring both. But at the end of the day, being in those environments, it's knowing the type of game you want to play. And that leads back to knowing how you play. And at the end of the day, knowing your pot.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, you're 100%. I honestly think that my specific that'll be a more thriving environment. The problem is that our pod, everybody builds that removal style now, so it's like it's just really who
you're gonna get a rude awakening at a Command Fest.
No, I agree. I'm gonna see a lot of really high level players. I'm saying my style of build, because it's very general. I think that'll be an environment that most of mine will, with the exception of the obvious combo piece ones, because everyone's gonna be like, oh no. the more homebrewed ones, like the more recent last 5 or 6, I think that'll be a good place for them to be really tested, and I think that I expect them to play well.
I think you're going to be surprised of how much you've learned how to play Magic, and how much an event like that is really going to be able to show you how versatile of a Magic player you are than sometimes we even realize.
Yeah, well, because we're used to playing each other. We play each other, the same 26 people now, every time. I don't play anybody else except for our group.
And that right there is going to be probably one of the coolest things with getting to show what you do. So, guys, I know we've been...
It'd be a blast.
Oh, yeah. I know we've been chatting for a little bit. We can definitely take this conversation offline. But I appreciate you guys having me on tonight.
Yeah, man.
And I hope to be able to be invited back maybe in the future if the viewers are cool with me being there. I know I'm a little bit of the oddball of the group with less removal and less all this. But
hey, your
I'm
unique beats our ass every time.
I'd definitely love to be a part of this again if I can in the future.
Yeah, man. We'll definitely talk about checking schedules and whatever, but we can talk about that off air. Unless you have any last words for everybody, Josh, Anthony. I think we're going to call it here, and I will see you guys in the next one.
See ya.
Good night.
Peak of male performance.